Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Minnie, a multi-passionate traveler and creative. Today we're talking about my passion of language learning and my desire to become a polyglot. Yes, I am an aspiring polyglot, but not a polyglot yet. And in case you didn't know, because I definitely had to look this up, basically being a polyglot is more about your proficiency. You have monolingual, which means you only speak one language, which is probably your native language. Bilingual in two languages. And then trilingual, which I want to say fluent, but another definition said you have proficiency in three languages. And then there is multilingual, which often gets kind of interchanged with polyglot, but it is not the same thing. Polyglot is like the final level, the big boss. But multilingual, as another definition I found says, it refers to your ability to communicate in different languages, whereas polyglot would be that proficiency in four or more languages. And so, honestly, I guess I would be under the multilingual category, even though I am hesitant to put myself in that category. And the reason being is I am not fluent in Korean. So therefore, I cannot be bilingual. However, I can communicate in Korean and I can communicate in Thai. So I'm gonna go multilingual adjacent. So you're probably thinking, why? How? Why all at once? While everyone else was baking banana bread and sourdough and, working out and getting in shape, I was barely getting out of bed. And it wasn't until my sisters came to visit me and we were watching K-dramas that language learning piqued my interest, right? So all they watched was K-dramas and I liked the sound of Korean. And so I got on Duolingo and I was like, ooh, look at me. Honestly, it was the only thing I could stay focused with. Like I couldn't get myself to do anything else, but just being on Duolingo, it was exciting. It was fun. So that is how I started learning Korean. 3 months after I started learning Korean, I started watching Thai BLs. And if you know, you know. At first, I didn't like the sound of Thai, but I was very intrigued by it. So obviously, I kept watching the BLs until finally I was like, no, I think I like this language. And I started learning Thai about 3 months after I started learning Korean, and I was learning them simultaneously. And I got on italki, I was looking online, I was watching YouTube videos. However, I kind of dropped off with Thai after being in Korea for a while because I also felt like I wasn't going anywhere with my Korean, so I put a pause on Thai to focus more on my Korean. So where does Spanish come into the mix? Well, while in school, because I went to school to learn Korean, one of our assignments was we had to write about our dream. And at the time, I didn't really have one, and my teacher insisted that I make one up. And so I was like, well, I want to travel the world and be a polyglot. Obviously, to be a polyglot, you have to know four or more languages. So I needed one more language. So how did I pick my fourth languages? My fourth language, simple. I looked into a bunch of different languages. I looked into the way they sounded, I looked into the way they were written, and while some piqued my interest, I did dabble in Chinese and I did dabble in Japanese. Spanish seemed to be the one that stuck the most, not only because I come from a hometown where many people do speak Spanish, but as far as the difficulty, I felt like I needed something that was easier to grasp than both Korean and Thai. So I felt like it was kind of the perfect addition to the mix. And that's how I picked all my languages that I'm currently learning. There are a few honorable mentions, but these are the ones that I decided to focus on and become fluent in. And the others, I'm like, I'll learn what I learn and we'll see where it goes. So, when I talk about the languages I'm learning, most people are confused, right? To them, Spanish makes sense. However, Korean and Thai don't make sense to them at all. It's always, oh, why don't you learn Japanese instead? Or, Mandarin would be more useful to you, blah, 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 blah. And honestly, for me, the goal is not usefulness. It is me exploring my curiosity, and the more I learn about these particular languages, the more I want to learn. And so I actually think it helps me because I'm not locked into this like, oh no, this is for like my future and I really have to. This is for fun. The reason I'm still going is because it is fun for me. And honestly, I'm not willing to let anything get in the way of that. Like, I'm sure, well, I know for a fact that it has benefits, it will benefit me in the future, but as far as like how or when, I'm not really worried about that. So that's kind of how it fits into my life, because it may be chaotic to some people, but it makes perfect sense to me. And that is my life. And so as I embark on this journey and I am constantly looking at resources and study methods and all of this, honestly, the best thing that has worked for me has been fun. I've stopped using pretty much every app because while I did find some apps useful for some languages and not useful for others, what has got me as far in language learning across the board has been TV and podcast. Now, TV, just because it is really good to listen with visuals, especially things that you can watch over and over and over again. I tend to watch the same shows over again. I tend to watch Disney movies in the languages that I'm learning because I already know what the character is saying. And so watching it in the different languages helps me pick up faster what the different words mean. Podcasts are really important. Again, for listening and understanding without the visual, I also use podcasts for shadowing. And shadowing is simply just listening to something in your target languages and repeating it as best you can. Generally speaking, that is how I learn. If it's not interesting to me, I probably won't be able to focus on it long enough. And that's not to say that I've never used a textbook. I am very picky about my textbooks, but that's something we can talk about later. Something that didn't work for me is learning one language at a time. And I know that sounds insane to a lot of people. I often hear, well, what are you doing? Because if you would just pick one, you would learn it faster. Well, in fact, I did do that with Korean and I nearly gave up and I wanted to stop learning languages completely. And so what I find is having multiple, three is a bit much, but I have kind of sorted that out in my head as well. But having multiple languages means when I get frustrated with one, I can focus more on one that I'm not frustrated with. And so my brain is still in the mood to learn languages and study, and I still have that structure of, okay, this is something we do often. Whereas if I learn one and I get frustrated and then I put it down for 6 months, it's much harder to get back in the groove of learning. And so that's why I'm learning multiple at a time. And again, this is not like, oh, I can't get a scholarship if I don't have this. In that case, I completely understand learning only one, but this is the way my brain works and it's working for me. So it is what it is. So, my advice to anyone who wants to learn a language, is currently learning languages, and doesn't want to give up is to have fun with it and follow your curiosity. If you have trouble sitting down and reading a textbook, then maybe textbooks aren't for you, and that's okay. Maybe pick a YouTuber who talks about something that you already enjoy. So if you are a dancer, watch dance videos in your target language, watch a dancer routine, watch, a day in the life of a dancer, because generally speaking, you already know what they're saying and what they're talking about. And another thing is, like, don't rush yourself. If you are constantly beating yourself up for not having enough time or not spending enough time learning a language, it makes it into something that you don't want to do. It makes it into a chore. And I don't know about y'all, but when I don't want to do a chore, it'll sit there forever before I touch it. So, you know, again, find the joy in language learning, and then you'll want to do it naturally. And you must celebrate yourself over the smallest things. Like, I am nowhere near proficient in Spanish, but if I go somewhere and somebody says something in the grocery store, and they don't even have to be talking to me, but I understood what they were saying, I give myself a pat on the back. When living in Korea, if I got through a conversation without asking somebody to, like, say it again or re-explain themselves, I patted myself on the back because it's your own personal dopamine hit. That's all I have for today. Later we'll go over how I track my progress and where I am in each language. But tell me, what languages are you learning? What languages are you interested in learning? And I will see you next time. Bye bye.